Good afternoon. It is Friday, April 24th. This is a brief recap of the post that I made to my blog this week, Leadership That Succeeds and Leadership That Fails. On Monday, I wrote about CRMs, Customer Relationship Management Systems. I've been the admin on a number of these systems, including installing them, and I am a big proponent of it. However, initially, CRMs are disdained by just about everyone because most employees feel as if it's Big Brother watching over them. And the primary reason for apprehension is that folks don't feel like it accurately accounts for every minute of the day. Well, that's not what CRMs are meant to do. It's meant to log significant touch points that you've made with the customer so that you can later refer back to them with data mining tools, and more importantly, others can refer to them. Strong leaders get that you have tasks that are going to be time sucks and will not be reflected in a CRM. Even successful leaders, senior leaders, have other duties as assigned, so they get it. But I recall uh, entering into the newspaper business a number of decades ago, and as an account executive, I was given a green bar computer printout and said, okay, here are your customers, go call on them. I had no idea who called on them before, what was presented, and so I was starting from scratch. And so I would have started stronger out of the gate had I had a CRM that I could have looked backwards on what the company had been doing with the customer. So successful leaders get that there are a number of tools. They don't use just one of them as a paddle to try to lead. On Tuesday, I wrote about successful leaders don't call their employees family. Now, I get that probably there are leaders, strong leaders, successful leaders that do use that word in an all employee email. Hey, let's welcome Dennis to company XYZ family. I understand the intent, I just disagree with it. Mainly because I've worked for a number of family owned operations, and a couple of them were dysfunctional. When there was a disagreement in the family, non family employees knew to duck under their desk and wait for the all clear sign, and you never would take a side because you didn't want your career to end. And so that often meant that the best decision for the business wasn't being made because of that fear. And so in the workplace, it's not family. Think about family gatherings where you put up with an annoying relative. You do it because they're family and because maybe you only have to do it a couple of times a year, a few hours at a time. Often you'll hear in businesses that do treat coworkers as family, oh, that's just Joe. That's the way he is. He doesn't mean anything by it. But that's not the point. A coworker potentially could be subjected to inappropriate behavior, subpar performance that is just ignored. And that's not the right way to lead or to run an operation. So the leadership principle here is treat employees like responsible adults, and they'll feel valued without needing to be called family. On Wednesday, I wrote about savoring the fleeting moment of success. I go into details of one of the markets that I was in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, where during my 7 years there, um, one of the competitors closed their doors. And while that certainly meant the loss of jobs for the competitors, it did mean a windfall that was hard fought and earned by the company that I worked for. And so you need those types of successes to look back upon, particularly when you're going through a rough patch. Being a leader will mean you have plenty of stressful moments. And so one of the ways that you persevere is by savoring those successful memories. Yesterday, I wrote about knowing what you are worth. I once worked with someone who, because of her cultural background, was raised to not indicate she wanted a promotion. And so she was passed over a number of times And finally, she started to raise her hand and express her interests. And eventually, she got promoted and grew within the organization. And so, from that, I would encourage you to tout your own horn. No one's going to sing your praises, or very few people. And so you occasionally need to test your marketability. I mentioned elsewhere in this blog that I worked in 13 markets. So those were 13 job offers that I accepted, but I rejected or was rejected or declined just as many. But each time that I tested my marketability, I was able to refresh my resume, sharpen my portfolio, and develop more of my a better A game for the next opportunity that would come along. And so the leadership principle here, you won't always learn your worth at your current job. Sometimes you need to test the market to understand your true value. And then today I wrote about strong leaders get through the valley of despair. That might be strong language for the point, but I'm quoting a Scottish pastor and theologian from the 1600s, Samuel Rutherford, who once remarked, "When I am in the cellar of affliction, that is where the king keeps his wine." And one of the points he was making from a Christian is that often when Christians go through times of affliction, they will often remark that is when God's promises are the sweetest to them. And I think there's a parallel for leadership here. Growth rarely comes without pressure. Sometimes the best products, services, innovations are forged when you're threatened competitively or through regulatory demands. And so let's face it, sailing will not always be smooth. And so you'll need to have that personal experience on how to weather the storm. You only learn that by going through it. So brace for when it happens and also embrace when it happens. The strongest leaders are built through resistance, not a professional life of ease.